Did you know $800 billion to $2 trillion is laundered globally every year? That's almost 5% of the world's GDP, all cleaned and hidden in plain sight. In simple terms, money laundering is the process of making illegal money appear legal before the government and financial institutions.
Don't you get it? On the outside, it's a nail salon, right? On the inside, it's the best money laundry a growing boy could ask for.
How do you do that? Well, you'll need a couple of things. First and obvious, your dirty cash. This is the money usually obtained through criminal activities like drug selling, racketeering, or anything else that comes to mind. Second, a lawyer. He doesn't have to be a genius like Saul Goodman. The basic knowledge of law, taxes, and economy will do. And third, a legal business. You need something to generate legal income you can show on the balance sheets once the authorities come knocking on your door. But this sounds oversimplified, doesn't it? That's because it is. The process is a bit more complex than that, and today you'll learn how even the smartest among criminals sometimes fail to complete it. Also, there are aspects of money laundering that affect not just criminals and the justice system, but an average person too. The ripple effects of the financial manipulation create way more damage than it meets the eye. The reason criminals go through all the headaches with money laundering is to avoid going to prison, but also their money getting confiscated and taken away. That is why the process of money laundering is one of the most important parts of their operations, and it goes through 3 stages: placement, layering, and integration. Placement is the introduction of dirty money into the economy. This stage carries the most risk because large amounts of cash could raise red flags for banks and other institutions. That's why criminals usually have more businesses rather than just one. It makes sense to launder $100 million through 20 small companies instead of one that could attract a lot of attention. The other way this works is by buying businesses like bars, restaurants, casinos, beauty salons, or other service-providing ventures. This is because no one can prove your bar didn't serve 100 beers today, or that your hair salon didn't perform a couple of $1,000 treatments. Basically, it doesn't matter what your service is, as long as you can put it into a balance sheet. Once you've completed the placement, then comes the layering. Just as its name says, the dirty money is being layered in legitimacy. You use it to fill the registers of your business, and all of a sudden, your dirty money becomes the money acquired from pouring beers or cutting hair. This introduces us to the third and last stage of the process, called the integration. At this point, the money has been cleaned and gets integrated back into the economy as legal income. It can be used to buy properties, cars, or anything that comes to mind. Once the entire process has been done, it's impossible to confiscate the funds and label them as illegal, which was the entire goal from the beginning. But although it may sound simple, not all the criminals get away with money laundering. Sometimes they actually get caught red-handed, and one of the biggest examples in history is the man who actually is responsible for the term itself.
His name is Alphonse Capone.
You've probably heard his name hundreds of times in movies, TV shows, or history specials. He is one of the biggest mob bosses, not just in Chicago, but all America. Capone's empire had been built on crime and corruption. Illegal import, racketeering, violence, and every other type of outlawed activities known to man. But although he was already powerful before starting the money laundering practice, it was exactly the very process of it that enabled him to speed up the growth of his operations by an insane rate. According to the tales, one day he was sitting in his mansion thinking about ways to make his money appear legal. The most usual ways were real estate and restaurants, but there was so much money involved he had to look for other options. Luckily, his advisor at the time, Jake Guzik, had a really good mind when it came to avoiding the rules. He suggested using laundromats due to their practicality, and Capone was thrilled with the idea. The amounts of money they laundered are probably impossible to determine, and all the cash being quickly available to them after getting through the washing machine was what grew their influence so much they didn't hesitate to use all kinds of violence in open daylight. They'd literally shoot a man on the street and no one could do a thing against them. They either had police, prosecutors, or judges on a payroll, or witnesses were too afraid of speaking up. However, the real power of the money laundering process is expressed by the fact that even this mighty USA administration couldn't get Capone because of it. It was simply impossible to prove. The thing that got him locked up was tax evasion. Not murder, not bootlegging, not money laundering, but tax evasion. Yes, the same crime your dentist, hairstylist, or pediatrician could commit. Capone got 11 years behind bars and was fined $50,000 alongside $210,000 he had to pay back for taxes. But that was a mere slap on the wrist. In today's money, the fine was just under $1 million, while the taxes were around $4.5 million. It's hard to imagine someone running a city like Chicago today and even flinching about that. Still, the years in prison weakened his position, making him the shadow of his former self. Capone would die 8 years after getting out due to cardiac arrest. If you're still with us, unlike Al Capone, and you're enjoying this video, don't be shy to hit the subscribe button. It'll help you view more interesting stories like this, and it'll help us make more high-quality content for you. But his legacy still lives within not just the US economy, but almost the entire world. You see, because money laundering became a popular method pretty much everywhere, governments had to step up if they wanted to catch their biggest criminals. Thanks to technology, the investigation process is way more advanced today. But if it wasn't for AI's greed for money and power, maybe we wouldn't have the same level of awareness regarding money laundering and its threats to the economy. How money laundering affects the economy? When enough people do it on a larger scale, the consequences can be really scary. First, the supply of money not backed up by true value increases, which is inflation 101. Also, the change in money demand becomes too unpredictable, so over time you lose people willing to invest in such unstable markets. The real estate prices also get blown out of proportions, which is what we're actually witnessing in the present. Housing has never been so unaffordable, despite humanity making historically high-tech advancements. This is more than enough to make you ask, what the hell's going on? Lastly, any country with a money laundering problem would go through a serious lack of tax revenue, which creates all kinds of new problems. Public services become either awful or non-existent, and the entire country becomes a mess to live in. How does it affect the individual? When taxes don't get collected properly, the first ones to take the hit are the infrastructure, health department, and education. Then there are police, firefighters, and all the other public service providers who often need expensive equipment to do their job at the highest level. Once those are not available, good luck with maintaining normal life for millions of people. The worst thing about money laundering and its effects on the tax system is that an average person pays the ultimate price. The tax burden increases, the gap income grows even larger between the rich and the poor, the job market shrinks, and the cost of living significantly goes up. So what is it that countries can do to prevent money laundering and avoid hurting their economy? The answer might not be that simple. On some level, a money laundering process is perfect. No one can limit your freedom to start and run companies. So if you follow all the steps, the authorities have very slim chances of proving you're doing what they charge you with. The best way to catch someone laundering money is not to chase after them, but to observe their operations and wait for them to make a mistake. That's actually how Al Capone got caught as well, alongside so many other notorious criminals throughout history. It's always their arrogance that puts them away rather than some hero cop with superhuman abilities. But it's not hopeless, quite the opposite. Both banks and other financial bodies monitor any type of unusual money-related behavior, which is why you have things like deposit limits. If anyone wanted to deposit large amounts of cash, they couldn't do it without going through a verification process that requires proof regarding the source of money. How is money laundering fought in court? To actually prove in court that someone has been laundering money, the prosecutor needs two main arguments. First, he must prove the money has been acquired through illegal activities. And second, he must prove the money couldn't potentially have come from another illegal source. Of course, this takes a very complex cooperation between the police, DA's office, and banks and tax officials as well. When you have such a large network of people involved, it really takes hard work to investigate and build a case just for it to get presented before a judge and then passed on for a trial. Even then, there's a lot of effort required for preparing for the case, proving all the claims and avoiding the traps the opposition's lawyers create, which can be quite tricky if they know what they're doing. What are the penalties? Ultimately, it all comes down to knowing regulations and executing technicalities to perfection. If you set up companies in a way that can't be traced back to you, make sure every dollar you earn is backed by your balance sheets, and you listen to your lawyer's advice. You might avoid the crash of your illegal empire, unlike the almighty and all-knowing Walter White.
You got me.
Jokes aside, it's better not to start any illegal endeavors. Financial crime is a very serious matter, especially in the US. The penalty for money laundering is 10 to 20 years in prison, alongside fines that go from $500,000 up to double the laundered amount, which can end up being millions. If there are any lessons to be taken away from people who end up convicted for financial crimes, it's that it's never worth it. No private jets, boats, and parties can make it up for a chance of sleeping in a concrete cell with only 1 hour a day outside. The idea of living like that for 10 or 20 years should be enough to scare almost anyone into working for a living. That's it for today, dear friends. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Let us know in the comments what was your favorite part, and if you have any suggestions for our next videos, don't hesitate to share them down as well. Thank you for watching and growing this channel. Make sure you don't miss out on more interesting stories by hitting that subscribe button. See you in the next one.